Hey guys, Doward here. Gonna be doing some work on my Avalanche. We're gonna be changing out these. These are my front shocks. And we're gonna be doing it without removing the wheel. Alright, so I've got an 05 1500 four-wheel drive Avalanche. I'm gonna be putting just a set of these on there, just standard Gabriel Pro Guards. The truck's not lifted or anything like that, just sitting on, a set of 285 75 16 Nito Terra grapplers. Love the tires, by the way. So yeah, we're going to start out by removing the lower bolt. So to do that, we're going to need a long 21mm wrench, and in this case I have a 21mm ratcheting wrench as well. The nut and the bolt on my 05 Avalanche are both 21mm, so that's what I'll need. And here is the bolt in question. Alright, so to remove the top, we have to pop the hood. And we are looking for the upper shock mount, which is right there. So I got to take that nut off. Now, my shocks, I already know, are completely rusted up. That's the reason I'm actually replacing them. So I'm going to have to break out my handy dandy vice grips here that I will use to capture the rod. Get this out of the way. That I use to try to capture the rod there and finish breaking it loose. Alright, so here's my setup. I've got two extensions, 1/2-inch drive on a 15mm socket with my 36-inch breaker bar. You can see I've got my vice grips in there. Now normally on a non-rusted out pair of shocks, what you would actually have on a non-rusted out pair of shocks, if you'll notice, the top of this has actually got a flat spot to it. Normally you'd be able to hold that with a wrench and then just loosen the bolt underneath. Well, mine are so rusted out, that's not an option. So what I'm going to do is get this on here and break it all loose. Alright, it's now broken loose, and I can switch over to my ratchet. Alright, so the bolt is out. The next thing I'm going to do is see if I can wiggle this out from the bottom. I'm hoping I can just move this out the way and drop it through. Kind of like this. All right. And here's my old shock. Ew. I can hear it crunching and making noise, and as you can see, it's quite rusted. There's some dents in it. Not very smooth. It's just time to replace these. So, the old shock will get tossed over here into the trash can. I noticed the new shock has this, string on it. What I'll do is take this guy. It's got a full metal shield on it too. It's kind of nice. And I want to see if I can get this situated in place. Oh yeah, it doesn't look like I'll have any issue with this. Okay, good. Alright. So now I know I can fit it in there without having to move anything around. What I want to do is take my bag of hardware, open it up. See, I've got my rubber mounts here. Now on your rubber mounts, you see this little lip? See this lip? This lip will always face toward the metal. So in this case, I'll slide these out. I'll have a metal washer on the bottom. a metal washer, followed with one of these. Are they different sizes? Nope, just looks like it's a tight fit. There we go. Alright. Now notice that this is still on here. What I'm going to do is leave this on here until I actually get the shock in position. I get the bottom bolted down. And then when I snip this, because this is nitrogen charged shock, this is going to extend. And I want this to extend right into the hole it needs to go into. So, let's take this down here. Let's get this into place. Get the bottom lined up. Come on, girl. Alright, so I did here, if you notice now, I can press this down and just move the strap holding it a little bit further over, so it should hold it just slightly lower so I can get it in there now. Alright, so as you can see, we're not quite lined up properly, so I want to just pull that over. Now it's very important to make sure that you get that rubber piece centered in there correctly. So now what we'll do is we'll take our next rubber piece, lip side goes down, push that down, put our piece over it, and we'll get nuts started so it doesn't work its way back out. Alright, so the top part of this is ready to be tightened up, so now let's go down back to the bottom. Alright, as you can see, I was able to push that up. I actually took a screwdriver, put it into the hole, wedged it up, popped the bolt through, started the nut on the back side. So now the only thing left to do is to remove this. So cut that out, pull it off there. Then we'll go up top. Come on, you. There we go. We'll get this out of the way. Now we'll just torque our bottom bolt to spec, torque our top bolt to spec, and this side's done. I'm not going to bother recording the other side because it's going to be exactly the same as this. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope this gave you some idea of how to, change out your shocks. It's definitely a good idea to do. I've got 118,000 miles on this, and these guys were definitely worn out. So there you go. Alright, so I finished my new shock install, and I'm going to go take it for a little test drive and see how it does with the new shocks up front. And I thought I'd take this time to have a little talk with everybody. See, a lot of people have a really wrong idea what a shock does. The only thing a shock absorber does is it dampens the oscillation of the spring. Now in my case, I have a heavy duty torsion bar front end, so it's obviously going to, that's my spring. The torsion bar is my spring. Well, what I'm going to do here is avoid a squirrel. I've had speed bumps coming outside my neighborhood that my truck always would bounce and just keep bouncing over. The classic push test, if you will, on a shock, where you just push down on that corner, and if the vehicle keeps bouncing, then obviously your shock is bad. Well, for me, having a heavy duty torsion bar front end on this thing, I'd push down on it and the spring would barely move. I just didn't generate enough for it, I didn't generate enough force for it. I'll have to edit that out. So what I've got here is a speed bump up here, and we're going to see if my truck continues to bounce like a pogo stick when I go over it. Look at that, one bounce, up, down, and stop. See, the biggest thing with shocks, a lot of people are probably out there thinking, I don't need no new shocks, my shocks are fine, my truck road's fine. Well, the biggest thing with shocks is that when you brake quickly, you see how my front end barely even comes down anymore? See, when your vehicle is in motion, you have a specific amount of force that it's generating, and it's going, forward, when you hit the brakes, your vehicle has to come to a stop, and that energy has to be dissipated. Well, that energy is dissipated as heat in your rotors, and also as heat in your shocks. See, if your shocks are absorbing, or trying to absorb a bunch of that excess energy, then what ends up happening is when you come to a sudden stop, and make sure nobody's behind me here. When you come to a sudden stop, see, I've barely got any brake dive. That's what that's called, is brake dive. What you want to have happen is you want to have all of your force controlled via your brakes. You don't want your suspension trying to pick up some of the slack, because your suspension you can't control. You don't have brakes on your suspension or anything like that. That's part of the reason the magnetic shocks used in the they're actually magnetohydrodynamic shocks that are used in the Corvettes now are so cool, because under sudden braking they will stiffen up and they will keep your front nose from diving like crazy and causing a whole bunch of chaos with your brake.